Good evening, everybody. This is Darius Assemi, your host at GVWire Unfiltered, along with my co-host, Bill McEwen, Director and Vice President of News at GVWire. Good evening, Bill.
Good evening,
Good evening.
Darius. How's it going tonight?
Not bad. It sounds like it's a last of the cool days and cool evenings, at least for the next maybe week, 10 days. Um, Triple-digit temps returning to Fresno. How long will they last? Uh, Great article, but look at that. Tonight, 65 low, and then by the weekend, lows in the 70s. Of course, triple digits starting tomorrow. But we have, let me mention, we have a special guest, Trita Parsi, PhD, Middle East Geopolitical Affairs expert, who actually I sat down with yesterday, asked him several questions about Middle East, Israel, Gaza, what's happening with the Palestinians, and we recorded a session which will be airing here shortly. So stay tuned for that. But we're going to get through a few very cool local stuff first. So, with President Trump acknowledging that children are starving to death in Gaza, do you think he will pressure Israel to end the war? Overwhelming majority of folks said no, Trump is only concerned about the optics. He'll let Israel continue to wage war. A judge recently blocked a proposed Costco in North Fresno. Where do you think the project will end up? At the current location, 57% of you. There's some talk that it may go to Madera. Actually, we can put up the next slide. Just about a mile north into Madera County, where Madera County will get all the sales tax revenue, but majority of you feel that that will not happen. I share the same sentiment. Let me ask Bill McEwen. Bill, what are your thoughts on Costco potentially not building where at its current proposed site?
Before I answer that question, Darius, people should go to gvwire.com and read that story if they haven't already, because, we think about sales tax dollars, but property taxes are significant because this is an empty lot. It becomes an improved property. If you play Monopoly, you know what happens when you put houses and then a hotel on your property, right? It's worth a whole lot more money. The other thing I think GV Wire is the only one to raise is how beneficial this would be for Central Unified School District. It would really benefit the district. And so Jerry Dyer said, we can't afford to lose this. This would be a significant blow to the city of Fresno. He's already having a tough time balancing the budget. I think this was raised, the specter of Madera, to, put a little hurry up into the city of Fresno's gate and get them to either redo this EIR or negotiate with the plaintiffs and bring it back. Costco's got a big investment there already, though they don't technically own the land yet, but a lot of time, a lot of opportunity costs. I think it's going to go right there. And one reason why I think it's going to go right there, Madera doesn't have the infrastructure to support this. It would have to be close to Fresno to get those kind of numbers you want in a zip code or a couple zip codes to support a Costco, right? You understand this, Darius. And if you're talking about placing it close to Fresno, Madera has no infrastructure. So it's going to go in Fresno.
I agree with you. However, Madera, imagine a big Costco sign right off the freeway, north of the river. As you're driving north, I don't know how many people, 100,000 cars and trucks go on 99 every day. That number is probably low. So there's going to be a lot of potential folks that see Costco. They go, let's pull over for a hot dog and a soda, and then $200 later you walk out with a bunch of more stuff, some of which you don't actually need. Okay, Several comments. Robert Wharton, I can't wait for the beautiful apartments we built across from the new Costco as well. That's a Granville project, by the way, just across the street. Kathy Bloom, I think it will be in Madera. I like the comment that it would be in the school district. Well, if it goes in this location, Fresno County will get the money, and the property tax money increases, which means Central Unified benefits. But if it goes north of the river, somebody in Madera Unified will get the dollars. A couple of other comments, which I will elect not to read, about project that got killed. It hasn't gotten killed yet, Becky Wharton. Okay, let me quickly jump on to City Council. I'm sorry, who's raising money? Who is raining cash for some 2026 Fresno City Council hopefuls? And then we're going to quickly go through a bunch of breakdowns on folks. Let's go to slide 10. This is for 2026 Fresno City Council financial report that came out. Great article on GB Wire for those of you interested on who has raised money for which district at Fresno City Council. There's a few other folks, late entrants, that are not on this list yet. As that information comes in, which is probably end of next quarter or end of the year, which means their next report will not come out till probably February of 2026. But there's several more people that are not on this list. I know Deep Singh is in District 1, not on that list. And I believe there's one other person that had not opened up an account. So their name is not on the list. So there it is. The people that have raised money, and it kind of breaks it down by district and the amount of cash they have on hand.
Referring to the list, one thing to note, Joaquin Arambula has a low fundraising total, but we know he can raise tons and tons of money. He just hasn't started yet. And he's going for Miguel Arias's termed out seat. And then Brandon Vang, that total, he's raised $12,000 since his election. And, he's starting this. Not on the list is Elizabeth Jonathan Rosas, the Fresno Unified Trustee. She's formed a campaign committee to run again in 2026. So we can expect a rematch between Brandon Vang and Jonathan Rosas in that seat.
Thank you, Bill. That was the other person that it was. Elizabeth Jonathan Rosas is running, but she was not on the list because she has not opened up an account for that. Okay, let's quickly go through the balance of these. Slide 11. Who's off to a strong start in raising money in the Fresno area school board races? You need to read the article, and that will tell you, well, okay, this is a little bit of a chart on money raised. There's the folks. Valerie Davis, almost 10,000 on hand. Veva, sub 1,000. Susan Wittrup, almost 26,000. She's the one leading the pack early on, a year and several months before election. Andy Levine is not up for re-election. Neither is Claudia Casares. But Susan Wittrup, Veva Eslis, Valerie Davis are up for re-election. Keisha Thomas would be, but she's not. Well, we don't know if she's running yet or not. Right now she wants to run for city council. If she does not make it past the primary, she can make a decision to run for the school board or not. Let me quickly go through Clovis Unified, slide 13. Those are the numbers there. Not a whole lot to discuss. Jasprit Sidhu in area 5, 50, almost $6,000, followed by Hugh Autry in area 4 at 4,000. It's kind of early for that. Next, let's go to the next. That State Center Community College. What was interesting, by the way, it's the first time I saw that Roger Bonactar, who ran for city council in Northeast Fresno, is actually running for State Center Community College District, Area 6, with $29,000 almost cash on hand. Magdalena Gomez, Area 4, with 24. Austin Yule, a water attorney, Area 7, with 29,000. More on those folks in the article at GV Wire. Let's go to the next slide quickly. Governor's fundraising. Eleni Kounalakis has almost 5 million, followed by retired Senator Tony Atkins, over 4 million. Of course, Antonia Villaraigosa, who's been to Fresno many times, mayor of LA, past mayor of LA, over 3.5 million. He was the mayor of LA, Bill. I want to make sure I get that right. I believe he was LA
Yes,
mayor
he's the former mayor of Los Angeles and did a pretty good job there. Got some controversy because of a relationship with a television anchor. I don't know if you can remember that far back.
I remember the school district. Then he turned around, helped turn around LA Unified to some extent. Wasn't he involved in LA Unified, Bill?
Well, as mayor, raising the issue, he was. Okay. I think what's notable about this is with Kamala Harris out, now these candidates can go after their donors because, she really kind of slowed down the formation of this race. Everybody was waiting on her. And then there's a name that's not on this list, Darius. Everybody's waiting to see if Rick Caruso will run for governor. He's a Southern California businessman, former Republican, now a Democrat. And a lot of people in the state are saying, if he gets in as a Democrat, he's going to get a lot of business interests are going to go blue this time because they see him as that kind of centrist candidate that can cut a lot of red tape with cooperation from the legislature and really get California moving again. I think the thing about the Lieutenant Governor, Eleni Kounalakis, is she's got a lot of money in her family. She's going to be out there. She can raise cash, but she can also self-fund. I see her in the top tier of candidates. Let's see what happens with Katie Porter. And Darius, the final thing to look for, and this is from Dan Walters, he says if one Democratic candidate rises to the top as someone really strong, they will help or try to elevate one of the Republicans to the number 2 spot, so they'll have a free ride in the general election. And we saw that happen with Adam Schiff. He helped Steve Garvey finish second through a political action committee. That knocked Katie Porter out. So you didn't have that Dem on Dem duel that might have been close. Katie Porter has more personality than Adam Schiff. She might have won. She might have won for that U.S. Senate seat. So the rules of politics today, it's like anything goes.
Old political trick. Help one of your opponents that you can beat in the final. In this case, help a Republican opponent if you're a Democrat that you can easily beat in November, but not one of your other Democrat colleagues. Okay, let's move on to the next. State Assembly fundraising. There we go. Those are the numbers. Annalisa Perea with almost 260,000 cash on hand, followed by Alexandra Macedo of Tulare. Different races. You can see the rest of the numbers, but those are the top two, followed by Michael Murphy. David Tangipa of Clovis also has raised a substantial, and he's a freshman assembly. Let's move on to state Senate fundraising. Esmeralda Soria in the second spot, a little over 300K. Nathan Maxey, look at that, almost $500,000 cash on hand for Senate District 12 from North Clovis. That tells you he's a popular guy. He's been on the county board, and before that, he's on was Fresno Clovis City Council popular guy, a lot of supporters all across the board, and he's raised a boatload of money. Let's see, anybody else of interest there? Melissa Hurtado of Bakersfield, and Nelson Esparza at Senate 14, running against Esmeralda Soria, former council member, now Assemblywoman Soria, and current council member Esparza, gonna duel it out, or duke it out, I should say. What's interesting is Esparza is only $140,000 behind incumbent now Assemblywoman Soria. Let's move on to the next. I think this is one of Bill's hot topics. If Texas gerrymanders its House districts, Costa says California must follow. I think there's a brief video. We're going to play that, and then Bill has got a few comments.
I have concerns about it. I think is wrong. I mean, you know, you're trying to put your finger on the scale or to decide who your voters are. So Governor Newsom's response and other states that are blue states, I think, are trying to say, look, if you're going to put your finger on the scale and in the middle of that 10-year period, do another partisan gerrymandering, then blue states should consider, you know, countering that. And so that's what's happening right now. Voters in America don't like their elected officials, their politicians, choosing who they want their voters to be.
Right. Is this good for democracy?
I don't think so.
Bill, take it away.
So there you have Jim Costa saying he doesn't like gerrymandering, and it's not in there, but he also called for a national independent commission to draw the lines. That'll never happen. We had to work hard to get it in California. I got a lot more passion for the subject than Representative Costa does, clearly. I mean, he's saying gerrymandering's bad, but if Trump's gonna force or urge Texas to do this, and Texas follows suit, California has no choice but do likewise. So Darius, you know the Texas-California rivalry. The states,
Yeah.
we're sniping at each other all the time. You go back to what, 2014, and Governor Perry came to California and did a tour and was telling businesses, move to Texas, and you know, that kind of thing. Well, that's low level compared to this. It used to be tension, now we have a firefight. And so here's what Governor Newsom is proposing, Darius. They're going to draw up new maps. State Republicans would probably be knocked down to 3 or 4 or 5 under this map, rather than the legislature or the governor signing off on it. It'll be put to the voters in a special election in November. So November 2025, and then those lines would be in effect in 2026. Trump wants the Republicans to retain control of the House. It's very close now. They fear a blue wave. That's why he's pressuring Texas. In Texas, the Democrats, they left the state because they were going to have to vote on this redistricting measure. I mean, they're talking about having the FBI go find them and drag them back. You know, I think it's kind of a state issue. Why would the FBI involved? To sum this up, there are some Democrats, along with former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, and even the Fresno Bee, say you shouldn't try to beat Trump's rotten brand of democracy with more rotten democracy. But I'm not in that camp. Newsom's right here. Oh my God, I said Newsom's right. Can't believe it.
Okay.
With democracy at stake, you have to bring out the big guns. Here's what Congressman Scott Peters of San Diego told Politico. When Trump actually says he's at war and the war's with Democrats, we're not bringing a butter knife to a gunfight. Amen.
There you go. With that, let's move on to slide 24. Again, I sat down with a Middle East geopolitical expert, Trita Parsi, PhD, who's been on many news stations from CNN to Fox. That's the list. And he's been on Unfiltered a couple of times, and I'm glad that we got a chance to sit down for a brief few minutes, ask him a few questions. He has a lot of information out on social media and on his website, the Quincy Institute. Some of the articles that you've said. Let's put slide 25 up. There's a lot of Jewish Americans, Jewish Israelis, including a lot of rabbis protesting against what's shaping up in Gaza, the starvation of human beings. Tucker Carlson did an interview with, I think it was a former Green Beret person that was just came back from one of the aid centers and described how people are held back. Gates are left open, then let open. They have to run for about 8 to 10 kilometers to get to an aid center, and many times IDF soldiers are shooting ahead, over their heads and to their sides to kind of keep them in line. And this is inside Gaza, by the way. The 8 centers. There's let's put up slide 28. That's the areas at the bottom. There we go. The Gaza 8 sites in the red at the bottom. The 3 of them at the bottom. That only those areas available of delivering aid. 80% of Gaza has been bombed by Israel, and a humanitarian crisis. Even President Trump said yesterday, he said it's horrible. He's seen it's horrible, and it's happening because aid is not being allowed to enter through United Nations, through peacekeeping forces, to save over 2 million people from starving to death in the year 2025. Really shame on us. So let's, we're going to bring back we'll start with segment 1 of the video. And here's a question that I asked. What is another country that has used famine? Is a recent country that has used famine as a weapon of war? Let's play that video. Is there any, recent history where you've witnessed other nations use hunger and famine as a weapon?
I think the last case is in Somalia, in which there was an effort in 2010. I don't think it was as extensive and as deliberate as we are seeing it right now. And keep in mind, when it comes to the death toll, when we say that there's 60,000 dead, that's because the Gaza humanitarian health ministry in Gaza has been able to identify and confirm those deaths. But northern Gaza City is essentially a no-go zone. No journalists, no aid workers have been able to enter it for quite some time. Aerial footage of it just recently came out and it's completely destroyed. There are likely thousands of dead there under the rubble that are not part of what is being counted. So when all of these numbers come together, and at some point the world will see what Israel and through the support of the United States and Europe have been doing in Gaza. Once the world sees that, then I think it will be quite clear that this was a genocide, that this was not in any way, shape, or form even close to being proportionate to what Hamas did on October 7th.
Episode. By the way, Bill, any comments on that?
No, I would just, the slide before on this, Darius, you showed the column about Israel must open its eyes. It can defeat Hamas without starving a single child. That was written by a New York Times columnist, David French. And a lot of people are going, oh, New York Times, typical liberal stuff. David French is an Iraq war veteran. He fought there for 2 years, and he describes himself as a Christian Zionist. So he believes in the right of Israel to exist and all the reasons that are given for this. And he's a strong supporter of Israel. And what he has seen there led to this column: Israel must open its eyes. Why are we starving children? And in the column, he talks about what you've talked about several times, Darius. He talks about his experience in Iraq, where instead of bombing people, they went out and they went in the villages. They learned the lay of the land. They told the local people, we're going to build this infrastructure for you. We're going to build this mosque. We're going to build this food kitchen. We're going to get things operating. For us to do that, we need you to point to where the bad guys are. And that's what they did. This guy lived it. He knows it. And again, he's a self-described Christian Zionist, and he's very upset. And I think when someone who has supported Israel as strongly as David French blows the whistle on Netanyahu and the starvation there and the cruelty and the bombing, I think that a lot of other Christian Zionists, including supporters of Israel that watch this show, they should really start thinking twice. This isn't about politics. This is about right and wrong.
Thank you, Bill. And I get into some of that with Trita. So let's play the second clip. What responsibility does the United States have supporting Israel during this slaughter? What responsibility does the United States and its allies, call it the European Union, that they complain about Israeli actions, but they continue to fund and arm Israel in prosecuting this war in Gaza?
At this point, clearly, it's not a war. It is a mass slaughter. And increasingly, it appears evident that the International Court of Justice will find Israel guilty of genocide, which then means that the United States and Europe will be complicit, mindful of the extensive support it has provided Israel in all of this. Every country in the world has an obligation to prevent genocide, certainly an obligation not to participate or aid it. But the United States and much of Western Europe is not only aiding, but it is participating in all of this. So it is actually a very dangerous situation for the US itself as well, because of the complicity that it likely will be found in when it comes to this. So this is in one of many ways in which this support, this blind support for Israel, is strategically detrimental to the United States, because the United States is likely going to be found complicit in a genocide.
Hey, Slovenia just announced, country of Slovenia becomes the first European Union nation to ban all weapons trade with Israel. And then, of course, further on in this interview, I asked Trita about, why does the United States not exercise? I mean, we give Israel and a lot of other countries in that part of the world a lot of money every year. Why does the United States not exercise, its muscle power and say, we gotta have United Nations peacekeepers to keep Israelis safe and to make sure 2 million people in this day and age are not going to be starved of hunger. Now, I know there's folks inside the Israeli government that say, hey, those are not human beings. They're Palestinians. They're human animals. But there's many Jewish Israelis, Jewish Americans that are protesting, and many rabbis protesting the actions of the government of Israel against the civilians. The next segment is why would a country want to block aid, and how do you deal with Hamas? UN experts and human rights groups accuse Israel of deliberately engineering a famine in Gaza by blocking aid. and delivering only a fraction of the food needed. Do you see any evidence of that? And why would a country want to block aid to a population that is 98%, 99% civilian? There's probably still Hamas folks amongst them. That's my first question. Then I'm going to ask you, how do you deal with Hamas in this circumstance?
Well, to your first question, the evidence is overwhelming. And it's overwhelming not just because of facts on the ground, but because of the statements of Israeli government officials themselves, who have said that they are going to starve the population in Gaza, and how they have been allowing settlers to stand and destroy the food that is supposed to be coming in. And there's ample footage of that. Then they kick out the UN, which is the organization that is best equipped to handle this, who had set up more than 100 different places to deliver food. And they were delivering food the way it's supposed to be done, which is you deliver it where the people are. Instead, now they have contracted this out to a newly formed organization that is run by some very, very questionable people who have set up no more than 3-4 different places built by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, near IDF military bases. So now actually the people who are already starving have to walk 10 kilometers to get the food. And only 3% is delivered compared to the numbers that were delivered by the UN. So this whole thing is a charade. This is clearly a starvation policy, a deliberate one. It is fundamentally illegal against all international law. I mean, this is medieval type of things. Yet this is clearly what many of the officials in the Israeli government, including Ben-Gvir and Smotrich themselves, have said is the policy. So there isn't a question about this. The question is, what does the United States do about this? Mindful of the fact that the United States is complicit, as is much of the Western world, by continuing to support Israel as it is doing these things, and continuing to also provide excuses for Israel as it is engaged in forced starvation of a civilian population. As to your question about Hamas, there's probably very little left of Hamas, but it is frankly a side story, because regardless of what Israel is going to do to Hamas, it is illegal for it to starve deliberately the people of the Gaza Strip. It is illegal to do this to civilians. It is not so that just because there may be Hamas amongst them, that Israel can do whatever it wants. There are laws of warfare, and Israel is systematically violating those.
29 that shows the amount of food estimated to be that's needed every month to keep that population alive is about roughly 62,000 metric tons. In May, 1/3 of that, less than 1/3, was delivered, and a little bit more than a half was delivered in June. So that's why you see the pictures of all these kids, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12-year-olds, just running and yelling and screaming and crying for food. We throw a lot of food here. What is it? Average American throws away 250 pounds of food a year. We throw it away, leftovers, junk, stuff that goes bad. We over purchase. And in that part of the world, that we have a lot of control and influence, this is what people are doing to get a little bit of food. That video that's on your screen. And so many Israelis and Israeli Jews, Christians, Muslims across the world are protesting the actions of the Israeli government and not allowing aid to go in and save this group of folks, over 2 million Palestinians, from starvation. Which some of the stuff that I've talked on here earlier, a lot of folks going to get radicalized. 300 million Arabs see this every night on their evening news, more than 300 million. And a lot of folks in Europe see a different version of the news than we see here in the United States. I know there's a few folks from Europe that's on our immigrants from Europe on our show frequently. And of course, people in Eastern Asia and Russia see a different version of this. Let's play the next slide. the next video, why is Israel restricting journalists entering into Gaza? Now, there's a lot of stories that journalists are being killed, some journalists being killed by IDF and or not allowed to video. Why would Israel, who claims to be a democracy, not allow journalists to come in so that the world can see from an independent body what is actually taking place on the ground?
Well, because they're committing war crimes. Otherwise, there is no reason for the Israelis to prevent journalists from coming in. Saying that it's for the safety of the journalists themselves is a laughable statement, because ultimately it is up to the journalists to decide whether they want to accept the risk of going in there or not. It's not up to the Israelis to decide that. So I think it is highly questionable, and every report about this should question why the Israelis are not allowing the eyes and ears of the world to go in and see what is happening there. And this is not something that recently started. Throughout this entire war, the Israelis have prevented journalists from going in, except for a few cases and a few periods. And most of the reports that came out from people who were already in Gaza. Al Jazeera reporters, for instance, who were stationed and based in Gaza before all of this started. Most of them, however, have been killed by Israel at this point.
That's just incredible. So many journalists killed by Israeli forces. That's really something to be ashamed of. Is our support of Israel radicalizing people against our country, against the United States? Let's play the next clip. I have two questions for you. Number one, there's 300 million plus Arabs that see this every night, and that's probably the main part of the news. How is this helping to radicalize folks against more people against Israel and United States interests? And then I want to talk about the Israeli lobby influence over Washington and also United Kingdom. But let's talk about the radicalization first. Do you see this as really, you don't need any as an opportunity for the extremist groups, terrorist groups to go, okay, we have a lot more volunteers because of all the stuff that happens, that so many hundreds of millions of folks across the world, especially the Arab world, see every day or every night?
It would be quite surprising if it wouldn't develop in that way, because we have seen in the past that every time that we have warfare or we have slaughter of this kind, that it tends to give birth to radicalization and extremism, not just in those specific countries, but in the Arab world as a whole, in the Islamic world as a whole, and even beyond that. And this is the most horrific event that we have seen for decades now. So it wouldn't be surprising. And again, it's one of those ways in which this type of relationship that the United States has with Israel is strategically disadvantageous for the United States. It certainly is not an America first foreign policy to support this at the expense of the US itself.
And let's roll into the next clip about the lobbying influence over Congress and US foreign policy. And then after this clip, I want to bring Bill McEwen in for commentary. America's values is about liberating people from concentration camps, bringing aid to the world, bringing peace and prosperity. Why? What is there a role that the Israeli lobby is playing in, influencing America's foreign policy, influencing members of Congress, and which includes the Senate and United Kingdom?
So I can't speak that much about what is happening in the UK. It's not my area of expertise. But first of all, that is the story we tell ourselves, that is what the United States stands for. And I think that is what we are aspiring to stand for. Whether we always have or really try that hard is a different question. I think on several occasions we failed miserably. But that is nevertheless what we are aspiring for. That is certainly not what we're doing here. And by and large, our foreign policy in the Middle East, I think, has been quite problematic, not just recently, but quite some time. The pro-Israel lobby in Washington has been very powerful. I personally think that it is losing a lot of ground, but it has been able to create a scenario in which it is extremely politically costly for members of Congress to come out and speak out against some of these things, or to really organize against this. And while this is happening, we do have to recognize that it is losing a tremendous amount of ground. We had just a vote last week to ban arms sales of offensive weapons to Israel, with 27 senators voting in favor of it. Just 3 years ago, it would have been impossible to even introduce such a bill. Now, obviously, this is insufficient. These arms sales need to stop altogether, and we need to have a majority of members of Congress voting in favor of it. But the fact that it's now increased to 27 is an indication of the fact that it has become increasingly difficult and costly for the pro-Israel lobby to sustain the same level of support for Israel as it did before. Add to that the demographic change in which younger Americans have a very negative view of Israel at this point because of the genocide, because of the apartheid policies it pursues. Now, these are people who are not in power now, but in 5, 10, 15 years, many of them will be. And I think this has been a formative experience for many of them. And as a result, this is not a superficial view that they hold at this point. I think it's a rather deep, it's part of their worldview at this point. And as a result, that's going to make it even more difficult for these different interest groups to push the US in a direction that would be, frankly, a distortion of what the American public wants the foreign policy of the United States to be. I mean, throughout this entire period, we've had 80+% of the American public favoring a ceasefire, yet the United States has never seriously pursued it except for 1 or 2 brief occasions.
That's really, really eye-opening. Let me bring Bill McEwen. Bill, I've said it tonight, I've said it many times. I have a lot of Jewish American friends. I grew up with about half of my friends growing up in Tehran were Jewish Iranians. And I have a lot of Jewish friends from across the country that are protesting the atrocities and this genocide that's shaping up at the hands of the Israeli government, and they're disappointed why our government doesn't get more involved in delivering aid. I mean, we deliver aid all over the world, and we have. But when it comes to this, where we've supplied most of the weaponry, and that has helped destroy 80% of that Gaza Strip, we're not providing the aid. And Trita talked a lot about influence over Washington. Any comments on that?
So I want to go back to this, and yes, I'm an old man, but when I was a kid, one of the first things you learned in history was about the Berlin airlift. So here you had the Russians post World War II trying to starve the German people in Berlin. Why? Because Russia basically wanted to take over Germany. And in the United States, we had just fought this deadly, terrible war against Hitler's war machine. Would have been very easy for American leaders to say, well, forget about the Germans. So what if they starve? What did we do? We put our men and women in the Air Force, we put them in the air, they delivered goods night after night so that these people didn't starve. This is what America used to be about. And today we have a very unfortunate set of circumstances. We have AIPAC, which certainly has a right to exist and to get the Jewish message out and educate American officials about what's going on there. But they've become so powerful. You have all these congressmen that just bow down to them. And so they swallow the Kool-Aid, they vote the AIPAC line, and that's been bad. And so some people watching tonight will just say, well, Bill, you're against President Trump. No, Joe Biden had no independence. Joe Biden's the one that got the ball rolling on this. Joe Biden would talk about American values, and then he would let Israel persecute the war the way it wanted to. And then Trump just continued that. So this has been Democrats and Republicans aiding and abetting. And then the other very unfortunate situation exists in Israel. Netanyahu wants to hang on to power. He's not willing to give it up at any cost. To retain his control of Israel, he had to get in bed with the kooks of Israel, the far, far right. And those people are the ones really directing this policy. As you say, Darius, millions of Jews around the world don't back this war. They don't recognize Israel and what it's doing. They're aghast by it. But in Israel, you have this small group of people, and they believe, as you say, they believe Palestinians are just animals. It doesn't matter. This is our opportunity to force them to the sea. This is our opportunity to erase Palestine from the face of the earth, and we get this territory that we desperately need.
Great points, Bill. A lot of emotional comments on Facebook. I let folks read it themselves. One of the organizations, by the way, that spend a lot of time, resources in Washington, in the halls of Congress. I actually talked to Jim Costa, Congressman Costa, about this, and he goes, "Yes, they're there. They're outside my office, and that's Code Pink." By and large, American Jewish women that are protesting the war and the U.S. direct financial support, military support in this war against the people of Gaza. Let's play video 7, and then there's one more after that. There's millions of folks across the world that are rallying against Israeli military action. Do you have any comments on that? Have you witnessed that? Is that making a difference on their governments, from Australia to England to the Netherlands to the United States?
I think we have to be clear and say that a vast majority of the world public is revolted by what Israel is doing. This is, in their view, a genocide on top of an apartheid system. It is not necessarily translating yet into the type of policies that is needed to put a stop to this, particularly not in the West. But we're seeing how Western governments are increasingly detached from their own publics as they're continuing to support what Israel is doing. And it's going to come back to haunt them, whether politically at home or in international politics, as their own credibility is destroyed by themselves by supporting this. But outside of the West, we're also seeing significant moves. We have the Hague Group, a group of countries that come together, and they're now signing up for some very significant sanctions and boycotts of Israel as a way of forcing it to abide by international law and the rulings of the International Court of Justice.
The Hague Group? Is that what the Hague Group?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So I think things are changing. The question is it changing fast enough for the people of Gaza who are now dying in the thousands in this forced starvation?
Haas Toasty, who was a ex-Marine, retired Marine, who was on this program a few weeks ago, put several comments on why pay, quote, and I quote him, "Why pay taxes if we know it will go towards killing children?" Great question by Haas. And then the last segment, video 8. Let's play that. Tucker Carlson interviewed somebody that came back from the aid centers. I can't recall his name, and he witnessed, and he had his own videos that he showed on the Tucker Carlson show on how people are held back and then they're allowed to rush in while IDF soldiers are actually shooting from above to try to keep them in one corridor as they're running, for miles or kilometers to get to food. Any other instance besides that you know of folks that have come back, witnessed, and shown the video footage publicly in the United States?
Yeah, so this is the testimony of Tony Aguilar, a former U.S. Green Beret graduate of West Point, who was there as a contractor, saw this happen, objected, and eventually resigned and became a whistleblower because he realized that no one there was taking it seriously and that this was essentially a death trap. The number two of that organization actually resigned on day one, or actually after day one when they started this, realizing what he had signed up for and did not want to be part of it at all. So this is happening on a systematic basis. We have now cases of roughly 50 or so Palestinians a day being killed at these aid sites because of the manner in which the Israelis, instead of talking, instead of using signs or megaphones, are actually shooting at the crowd in order to do crowd control, using wires, razor wires that are illegal according to international law to use to protect civilian infrastructure. And this is what this is. So, and we have eyewitness reports from the hospitals. One that is very close to one of these sites, saying that the number of cases coming in with these type of gunshot wounds have increased dramatically since the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation started delivering aid. So you have more Palestinians killed as a result of the manner in which this aid is being distributed. And again, it's important to understand it's only about 3% compared to the amount that the UN was capable and was delivering earlier on. So thinking of this as some sort of a favor, this is a 97% reduction of the aid on top of actually killing the starving people as they're trying to get there. This is just bizarre. The fact that we're even having this conversation tells us how bad things have gotten. And it's gotten this bad because of the impunity that the United States offers Israel, in which Israel can commit increasingly horrific war crimes and then get intensifying American support, political support, to cover this up or to protect it against it. The more this happens, the worse these war crimes will become.
That was a lot of great insights by Trita. It's really appalling to see this happen in this day and age. We're not in World War II. We're not in World War I era. To see this happen, we've said so many times, we not allow another genocide. We're going to go liberate countries from occupation, from genocide, and it's really so much against America's values, against Jewish values, to see this happen. Again, I want to reiterate, I have many Jewish friends, both here in Fresno, across the country, across our nation, and in other parts of Europe where my high school friends immigrated to. And I haven't talked to all of them, but I know if I talk to all of them, they would all be against what's shaping up in that part of the world. I do have a few very aggressive Zionist Jewish friends, American Zionist, and they support. Well, I haven't talked to them about over the last 12 months, but several years back, they had different ideas on what needs to happen in that part of the world. But overwhelming majority of my Jewish friends are also ashamed of what's happening, shaping up in that country. We see a lot of protests by rabbis, by scientists, by folks that were actually rallying against Prime Minister Netanyahu on October 6th, 2023, who are, involved in every aspect of Israeli life, that don't want to have anything to do with this. And long term, this is going to be a stain on Israel. Israel which was supposed to be a beacon of democracy in a part of the world that is filled with a lot of Arab dictatorships and totalitarian regimes. Unfortunately, it's committing acts that are so far against America's values. And yet we're in this we're supporting and funding. Trita does not call it a war, occupation, destruction, genocide, whatever it is that you want to call it. I'm going to bring Bill in for final comments before we wrap up.
Well, Darius, just in regard to this, you say it's against American values. The other thing that's happening is you have people that hate Jews, they're anti-Semitic, and Israel now is feeding them as well. In addition to radicalizing people in the Middle East against Israel and the United States of America. And we've seen this rise of anti-Semitism in the United States. It's being documented. And that to me is really sad. I'd love to see the end of it. Shouldn't be judging people by race or creed or anything else. That's the American value. And yet in our country today, because of what's going on and because how the United States is propping up Israel, anti-Semitism again is on the rise. And I'll close with this. You can criticize Israel, what it does as a nation, its tactics, its policies, it could be economics, it could be on any issue. That doesn't make you anti-Semitic, though some people try to brand you that way. We all know better, and shame on Israel for even raising that kind of thought. It's just so weak.
Thank you, Bill, for that. And I'm going to echo your sentiments and again repeat what I just said a few minutes ago. Israel, by the way, which is an extremely advanced country in that part of the world, a lot of U.S. support, a lot of U.S. and European money have poured into Israel. I'm not even talking about public money, private money, from tech companies to ag companies to pharmaceuticals. Israel is at the forefront of a lot of innovation, including technology. I mean, there's several of their companies that have the latest technology as it comes to military and surveillance. And it could be an incredible asset in or ally in that part of the world, representing U.S. values, and help bring more prosperity and more democracy to the Arab countries around them. But unfortunately, there's a lot of war, whether it's Syria, whether it's Lebanon, Iran occasionally, and they all have issues. But there's such a better way to live and let live and bring peace and prosperity and bring people to the table of prosperity as you become more prosperous as a nation yourself. Bill?
Yes, Doris, I have just one postscript. I think it was mentioned early in the show, but you know, the fact is Hamas started this war. We don't agree with Israel's tactics, but Hamas is a terrible organization, terrorist group. It's against its people. Its leaders are vicious. They're brutal. Hamas should not exist anymore. And I just want to make sure that people understand. I know you agree with that, Darius, that they understand that's part of the mission of our explanation tonight as well. We don't overlook that fact.
Great point, and I agree with you. And by the way, there was protests by Palestinians in Gaza against Hamas. If you're the issue, the occupation of Palestinian people is this: one of the challenges. You don't get a chance to exercise democracy. You don't get a chance to pick. Matter of fact, there's several articles about how the Israeli government, was it the Netanyahu government, that actually at some point supported Hamas's existence, just to have an enemy, because then it wouldn't create there would not be a two-state solution. But Hamas has done a lot of terrible things to Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. But when you choke and occupy a country and don't allow democracy to thrive and prosper, and even, well, forget that, exist. Democracy doesn't exist under that kind of an occupation. You have a totalitarian military regime that if you're a Palestinian in Gaza Strip and you call it 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and you were against Hamas, you probably would perish. So this is one of the challenges of being occupied as a people. And those of us that believe in God, which I'm one of, God witnesses and sees everything. To my Christian friends, Jesus sees everything that is shaping up in that part of the world. And I've said this before, what would Jesus do if he was here today? Would Jesus support the oppression and starvation of the Palestinians at the hands with the financial support of the United States? We can end this in one day if we wanted to. Why hasn't there been a civil war in Gaza, Robert Wharton? Because people don't have arms. Only arms smuggled in is ran by or controlled by Hamas. Caring about civilians in Palestine is not the same as supporting Hamas. Haas Tosti, very great point. One person armed is a madman, but a group is a rebellion. A lot of great comments. A lot of great comments. For more information on what's shaping up in that part of the world, tune into GB Wire. We have great coverage from New York Times, from Reuters, and occasionally other publications. And we hope to have Dr. Trita Parsi back on the show soon. On that note, on behalf of all of us at GB Wire Unfiltered, have a great night. It's going to be warming up. Let's try to stay cool. We do have a lot of the great luxuries in our United States that we're afforded to, that so many of the people across the world don't get a chance to enjoy. So I'm grateful for living here as an immigrant, and I feel bad. I feel very sorry for the people of Palestine that are suffering daily. They can't even get a drink of water or the right food and nutrition. On that somber note, good evening, everybody, and see you all next Tuesday.